Flair ordered Bischoff to stand in a dunk tank for the next 3 hours, while all the WCW people who hate him, and boy, was that a long line, got to throw softballs to knock him in. Luckily for Bischoff, nobody who hates him has much of an arm, and these segments were dying of embarrassment as guys kept missing the target pitch after pitch on live TV. Listen, I love the idea of putting you in a dunk tank, but maybe pre-taping this so we could have made sure we had some guys knocking you in. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe, but that's the fun part of live TV, right?
Yeah, for sure.
If you want everything to look, if you want it to look like something Disney on Ice would produce, then yeah, you pre-tape it. But if you believe, as I did and still do, that the beauty of live television and the reason there's so much support and interest in professional wrestling today as a live television product is because that sense that anything can happen is an important part of the reasons why people watch live wrestling. Otherwise, they'd be watching taped wrestling because it's less expensive and easier. And there's less risk that something's going to go wrong. But then it's too stale. The fact that it's live matters. And sometimes the fact that things don't go according to plan reinforces the fact that it's live. And I don't want to suggest that you hope shit like this happens, but at the same time, you don't panic over it either. If you embrace that television live is different than a pre-tape show, reasons that I've already talked about, then you go with it. And if something doesn't go exactly the way it should have gone, creatively, sure, it's a little bit of a frustration, but overall, it supports the fact that it's live. And that has more value than a perfectly executed pre-tape segment.
Let's talk about Sandman. He's going to make his debut here, and he's not going to be identified by the announcers. The announcers were told, according to Dave Meltzer, you can't call him Sandman. You can't call him Jim Fullington. You can't mention ECW or Raven. You can't even explain what the hell Sandman was talking about to 95% of the audience. But he comes out with a cane. He's wrapped himself in barbed wire. He's not smoking a cigarette. Looks like he's dropped a few LBs. I guess this whole, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, we're fearing litigation from ECW, or is this a deal y'all cut, or what can you tell us about why
again, it's Dave Meltzer twisting, turning, inverting, and creating fiction. Were there issues regarding calling him Sandman? I think we had learned vis-a-vis the WWE trademark and copyright infringement federal lawsuit that we had to be judicious and careful about using previously used names, trademarks. Yeah. So was there an overall awareness that applied to everybody, not just Sandman? Of course there was. But again, I think this was built upon by Dave Meltzer to kind of create a narrative that wasn't necessarily true. Did we stay away from calling him Sandman? Yes. Did we fear litigation from ECW? Not really, because it was almost always cry wolf. That was a tactic that Paul Heyman used a lot, is to threaten lawsuits, because Paul was familiar with Turner as a talent. Paul knew, based on previous experience, that all you had to do was threaten Turner and they would settle. That was their MO. And quite literally, I was told that Turner Legal, if sued at that point in time by a former talent, and if that lawsuit was less than $100,000, it was likely just to be settled out of court, because anything less than $100,000, it was just the cost of being in business. And it was easier just to pay people off and make them go away than it was to stack up a bunch of ridiculous lawsuits in court and have attorneys spending time on it. Paul knew that. Paul knew the hesitance of Turner Legal to get involved in any kind of litigation,
because
valid or
Paul
not.
got paid
So
out
he used
before. Yeah.
he used it, but that's not the same as being afraid of it. Um, just aware. So we didn't use his name. That's not that shouldn't be unusual. The smoking thing, that was an issue because Turner had Ted personally had a big issue with smoking. I was notified, not by Ted, but by my boss at the time, I think it was Harvey Schiller, to no more cigars. Coming out with a lit cigar. We come
Yeah.
out with an unlit cigar as a prop. But to smoke in the ring, a cigar or a cigarette, I got a flag on Paul White. I had Paul White come to the ring while smoking a cigarette. I was notified immediately that that's a no-fly zone, Turner Broadcasting, so we stopped doing it. But other than that, there were no unusual conditions or restrictions as regarded to Sam.
What can you tell us about bringing him into WCW at all? I mean, we would see him as being the intelligent guy hanging out at Raven's Pool. Now we're transitioning to this. But somebody was watching ECW. You told us it wasn't you, but I know that you really enjoyed the real life Jim Fullington. Talk to us about how Sandman came to be a part of the WCW roster at all.
Uh, Likely Kevin Sullivan. Kevin had a much closer, was paying closer attention to ECW than I was. Could have been Terry Taylor before Terry left. I don't know. But if I had to guess, I would say it was probably Kevin Sullivan. Fine, I didn't hire everybody that was on a roster. Some I did. Clearly, I approved them. But for the most part, I've always been a macro manager, almost to a fault. I guess it's sometimes a flaw. Is you put the right people in charge, you give them the tools, you give them the authority, flexibility to make their decisions, and then you evaluate them over a period of time as to how great those decisions were or not. It's kind of my overall approach to management. I don't micromanage people at all. I never have. So Kevin was working within Kevin's budget and certainly more aware of Sandman than I was, felt that Sandman would be an asset to WCW. I likely agreed or signed off on it because of the hardcore aspect of what Kevin was trying to do and create. And certainly hardcore wrestling was becoming more interesting. And why not have more people that are known for that? So it just made sense. By the way, welcome, Sandman, to Ad Free Shows.
How about
Derek
that?
Sabato, what a great storyteller. And I just dig his voice. He's got one of those voices. You just want to sit around and listen to him tell stories. He's such a great storyteller and he's got the voice for it. I think he's going to be a huge asset. Ad Free Shows.
Enter Sandman. Episode 1 is live now over at adfreeshows.com. If you haven't already, be sure to check it out. I was told, hey man, this looks and feels like an old school shoot interview where he's pulling no punches. Yeah, that's the idea. He's here with a beer in hand and a cigarette too. Enter Sandman. Episode 1 available now over at adfreeshows.com.